Hello, everyone. This is video 4. We are beginning to this reading of this video with Serrano introduces himself. But before we start reading, let's recap what we've learned about so far. So, in the last chapter, Samira decided that she was going to carry on her mother's work, and she decided she was going to pass on the message. So, she was looking for the French resistance, which called themselves the Maquis. And so she was searching for them, but they actually found her as she was trying to escape from two guards at the bridge because she was out past curfew. And she used her dog as a distraction and used her acting skills to actually get by them. So they found her. She delivered the message. They told her they weren't able to go out and save her mom because they had a job to do. The message that she gave actually told them that it was time for them to do their part. And so they were supposed to blow up the train tracks in the tunnel and to keep the trucks from rolling out in full force. That way it helps the Americans, the Allies, to do their fighting. And so we're at the chapter now where they have came to the train station and there's an older man in there sitting by the fire reading. He is over the train station. And the Maquis were arguing back and forth about whether or not they should kill the man because he's French, and sometimes they had to help the Germans because they were made to, and sometimes they were collaborators because they liked the Germans. So they didn't want to take a chance on him telling anybody their plan. So they were arguing back and forth about what to do, and Serrano, Samira's puppy, takes matters into his own hands and he trots right up to the train station. And so that is where we're going to begin now. Serrano introduces himself. Serrano, no! Samira cried. She burst from the bushes where she and the Maquis were hiding and tried to catch the little dog, but she was too late. Serrano barked, and the pudgy gray-haired man with short gray beard opened the door. Samira froze. The old man wore brown pants and a blue jacket with a red kerchief tied around his neck. In his left hand he held a cup of something that steamed. Samira was perfectly visible to him in the moonlight. Well, 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 the old man said with a smile. He looked first at Samira, then Serrano, who trotted inside and turned around 3 times before settling himself by the wood stove. Ah, the old man said to Serrano, make yourself at home. When he turned around, Odysseus and the other Maquis had stepped out of the darkness with their guns. And who do we have here, Maquis? The old man said. He put the tips of his fingers to an imaginary hat. Brigadier Rene de Compiègne, French army, he said smartly, then added, the last war, of course. He's one of the hairy ones, said Jason. Hairy ones was a nickname for the French soldiers who had fought in the trenches of the First World War. They often had beards or mustaches, and the nickname stuck. You'll be here to blow up the train tracks in the tunnel then, said de Compiègne. It's just up around the bend. I'll show you where the telephone lines are, too, so you can cut those. Samira could tell the Maquis was surprised. They shared suspicious glances. You sound like you were waiting for us, Odysseus said. Well, not you personally, but someone from the Maquis. This is an important line. I myself had slowed down German trains on a number of occasions, the old man said proudly. You'd be surprised how difficult it is to get these old switches to work in a timely manner. He winked, and Samira understood that the difficulty with the switches was entirely engineered by de Compiègne. None of you know a young marquise by the name of Elise de Compiègne, do you? The old man asked hopefully. She's my daughter. The Boches called her up to the compulsory work service last year, and she ran away to join the Marquis rather than be a German slave. We use code names, Odysseus said. I'm sorry. De Compiègne nodded. Of course, that makes sense. I think we can trust this one, Jason told Odysseus. Odysseus agreed, and Samira sighed with relief. She didn't want to see the old man killed just because he was in the right place at the wrong time. Atlanta, you stay with the station keeper, Odysseus said. Samira started to argue, but Odysseus cut her off. We're dynamiting a tunnel. It's dangerous work, and I won't have you there. Besides, we need someone to stay here to cut the telephone lines. We'll leave them open until it's done, so not as to arouse suspicion should the Germans try to call. There's a phone junction box at the other end of the tunnel, de Compiègne told them. You can call us from there to tell us it's done." "Oh, you'll know," Jason said. "Enjoy the warm fire, Atlanta. We will be back before you can say boom." "Come inside, my dear," Payne said to Samira, heading in. "Do you drink coffee?" Jason held Samira back. "Keep an eye on him," he whispered, startling her. Hadn't Jason said the old man could be trusted? And what was she supposed to do if he was a collaborator after all? There was no time to ask any more questions. Jason and the McKees were already gone, walking down the track toward the tunnel. Samira followed the old man inside. Serrano's eyes peeked open to watch Samira as she sat at the station's little table. Then he went back to sleep with a contented sigh. The little dog had clearly already decided the old man wasn't a threat, but now Samira was suspicious. Payne put on a new pot of water on the wood stove. "This war," he said. "I thought when the first one ended that there would be no more war in my lifetime. Maybe ever again. How could anyone who saw what happened in the First World War ever let it happen again? But here we are." The long night was catching up to Samira. It was warm and cozy in the little station house, and she could feel herself getting drowsy. She rubbed her eyes to try to wake herself up. "I hope your daughter is all right," she said. "Thank you," Payne said. "Is one of those men your father?" "No," Samira told him. "My father is dead. Killed by the Nazis in Paris. They captured my mother earlier tonight." The pain of seeing her mother dragged away came back to her all over again. The tears welled up in her eyes. She put her head down on her arms on the table and looked away so Payne couldn't see her cry. "I'm sorry," the old man said. "I do not know if my daughter is alive or dead, so my wife and grandson are all I have left. But perhaps this war will end soon. We will both be reunited with what is left of our families." Boom! The room shook, rattling metal cups and tools. Samira jerked awake. She had fallen asleep, and she was supposed to keep an eye on the old man, and she had fallen asleep. "I think that was your friend," Payne said. He sat in a chair in the corner, a cup of coffee on the small table beside him, and an open book in his lap. Over by the wood stove, Serrano was awake and alert. The phone rang, and the old man got up to answer it. Samira rubbed the sleep from her eyes and realized the old man had put a blanket on her. It slipped to the floor. How long had she dozed? Had Payne phoned the German authorities while she had been asleep? Were Odysseus and Jason and the others about to be rounded up and tortured by Nazis for information about the Allied invasion? How could she have fallen asleep so fast? "I see," Payne said into the phone. His voice became urgent. "Yes, of course, I understand. I'll do what I can." He hung up and turned to Samira. "Quickly, my dear, we must hurry." He snatched up a long metal tool shaped like a T. "Your friends were able to blow the tracks, but not before an unscheduled train got past them. A train loaded down with German tanks." Wow. So a train got by then and got by before they blew up the tracks. And so that could be devastating to the fighting. They were trying to blow up the tracks and to keep the trucks from being able to get through easily. That way the Germans weren't able to fight fully, in full force, like they would have been with the trains and the trucks able to run. So the fact that the train got through with German tanks is very scary. This chapter is called Sabotage. Samira hurried outside with the station keeper. A train with the tanks on it got past. The tracks were blown. Nothing else could get through the tunnel. Not until long after the invasion was over. But a train full of tanks could be used against the English and Americans right now if the invasion failed. "But what can we do?" Samira asked. "See that big lever? The one with the switches on the tracks?" said Payne. "Move it to the middle, and we'll hammer the wooden blocks in the gaps. That might derail the train. In case it doesn't, I'll loosen some of the bolts on the track down the line. We'll have to hurry, though. The train will be on top of us in no time." "I'll start loosening the bolts," a familiar voice said. "You two jam the switches." Samira jumped as Jason emerged from the shadows of the station. "You!" Samira said. "I thought you'd gone on ahead with the others." "Odysseus left me to watch Payne, just in case." "I thought you said we could trust him." Jason shrugged. "I guess I was right, but at least I didn't fall asleep," he said with a smile. Samira scowled and ran to help Payne with the switch. Fetch me a couple of blocks of wood from the woodpile, Payne told her. She was back in seconds, and Sereno barked happily at her heels. It was all great fun to him, but in minutes a train weighed down with dozens of tanks was going to come barreling by unless they could stop it. Samira and Payne wedged the blocks in place, and he hammered them home with the sledgehammer. Good. Here, quickly, he said, panting. He grabbed another one of the T-shaped tools. They ran to where Jason was already working. Each piece of the railroad track was about 12 meters long and attached to the big wooden railroad ties by the bolts that screwed down to hold it tight. Payne fitted the T-shaped tool over one of the bolts and grunted, trying to turn it. Getting the bolts loose was hard, and it took a lot of strength to get them to budge. Jason had only gotten 3 loose already. Working together, Samir and Payne were as strong as Jason, and now they were pulling twice the number of bolts loose. How is it taking just one piece of track out going to do anything? Samira asked as they strained against another bolt. All it takes is for a thing that big and heavy and fast to come crashing down is to get it to slip its track, Jason explained. This works better than dynamite, but in daylight, the engineers usually see the missing track and stop the train. Samira felt a shuddering vibration deep down in her stomach. Payne stopped pulling on the T-wrench and put his ears to the track. It's almost here. Quickly, we must get away, he said, but they had only taken out half of the rail's bolts. Quick, hand me that sledgehammer, Jason cried. The train was coming around the bend. Samira could hear the steady chug, chug, chug of its steam engine. Its headlight illuminated the curve of track. Payne dragged her away as Jason hefted the sledgehammer and brought it down on the side of the rail. Clang! And again, clang! Knocking it a few more centimeters askew each time. He kept swinging, even as the train bore down on him. Jason! Samira yelled. Beside her, Payne was frantically waving his arms to one side. He was warning the train they had sabotaged the track. Samira grabbed at his hands and tried to stop him. What are you doing? Don't tell them what we've done. They can't stop the train in time now, even if they wanted to. Not with how fast they're going, Payne told her. But those engineers, they're French. We have to tell them to jump. Samira understood, and they both jumped up and down, waving their arms to get the attention of the engineers. The train charged closer. Jason still clanged away desperately, fully lit by the train's light now. The engineers saw him and Samira and Payne, and they jumped out of both sides of the engine, tumbling hard and dragging themselves away as best they could. The train plowed through the wooden blocks and she and Payne had hammered in at a switch like they weren't even there, shattering them like toothpicks as it roared on. Suddenly, Samir was lifted up into Payne's arms, and he ran away from the tracks, Serrano on his heels. Jason! Jason, get out of there! Samira cried. She saw Jason leap away at the last second, and then the train hit the empty space where the bent track had once been. Sorry, I think I grabbed. Nope. And now we're on a chapter that's called A Different Story. At first, Samira thought the train might just fly on past the gap in its rail. Its engine kept chugging and its wheels kept turning, but then it slumped, ever so slightly, but it slumped. The engine slipped off its tracks to the right, and then the 200-ton behemoth went charging down the embankment toward the river, pulling train car after train car of tanks down with it. The engine smashed into the riverbed with a thundering croom, and everything went topsy-turvy. With nowhere to go, the speeding train cars rammed into the ones in front of them and flipped and twisted and went flying, throwing tanks into the air like catapults. Clang, crang, sprang, throom! It was like the world was coming to an end. Samira and Payne ducked and covered their ears. A loose tank went spinning end over end, right through them, and Samira pulled Toronto into a hug as the thing bounced and flipped right over their heads. The train cars kept coming and coming for what seemed like forever, screeching and smashing into the others, jackknifing and splashing down into the river below. And then it was over. The engine's broiler still hissed and metal still popped and shifted and settled, but there was no explosion, no fire, just a giant graveyard of scrap metal and shattered wood surrounded by ruptured earth. Samira couldn't imagine anyone ever cleaning it all up or surviving it. Jason, she cried. She started to run toward the broken train cars and smashed tanks, but Descompagne caught her and held her back. But Jason, he's out there somewhere, she protested. Rene Descompagne just shook his head no. Samira's heart broke. She sobbed real tears for Jason, a man she'd met just an hour ago, whose real name she didn't even know. But he'd believed in her when no one else would, and he'd given his life to save countless more, including, Samira hoped, her mother's. But still, it wasn't fair that any one man should have to sacrifice so much. Descompagne hugged her tight until she stopped crying, and she wiped her eyes. I suppose that's it for me, too, Descompagne said. The Nazis will figure me for a McKees collaborator and blame me for this, which of course is true. You can go on the run. Join the McKees, Samira told him. Descompagne chuckled. Hiding out in the woods and fighting the Nazis is a young man's game, my dear. I'm too old for it. No, they'll find me here at home, and they'll be able to read the story of what happened as easily as I read a book. A story, Samira said. Come on, I have an idea. Samira led the old man back to his station house, which was miraculously still standing. An upended train car lay across its front path. Inside, Samira tipped over chairs, swept tools off the shelves, tossed Descompagne's book on the floor. What are you doing? He asked. You said the Nazis would read you like a book, so all we have to do is tell them a different story. You were reading a book by the fire. McKee's sabotager broke in, smashed the place up, and cut the phone lines. Over here, Descompagne said. He flipped open a metal box on the wall. It was full of black wires. Samira took a pair of cutters from the floor and snipped the phone lines. She tossed them back on the floor when she was finished and pulled a length of rope from the wall. Then they tied you up. What could I do? Said Descompagne, playing along. I'm an old man. I didn't want them to wreck the train, but they overpowered me. Samira smiled. As Descompagne lay down on the floor, Serrano licked his face, and Samira tied the old man's arms and legs tight, but not too tight. Hey, who else can say they took out a whole Panzer division single-handedly? Descompagne said with a smile. Will you be all right? She asked, suddenly worried about leaving him here all night. Yes, Descompagne said. Someone will want to know where their tanks are, and they will find me soon enough. Thank you, Samira. I hope you are reunited with your mother soon. And you with your daughter, Samira said. Outside the station keeper's house, Samira wondered what to do now. Her mother had told her to get somewhere safe, but no, Samira would go to Bayeux. That's where her mother was, and her mother was the only person she had left. In the weird stillness and the quiet of the train wreck, Samira heard the drone of airplanes high overhead. She looked up. Mushrooms sprouted in the sky, black against the gray clouds. Parachutes, Samira realized. The Americans and English coming to save them. Coming to save her mother. Let's go, Serrano, Samira told her little friend. We've done our part here. It's all up to the soldiers now. And with that, we're on page 72, and we're actually to a new section of the book called Operation Tonga. And so we're actually going to stop there. That's where we get to meet some more characters. And we're actually going to stop there. Wow. So not only did they stop the trains, but they also stopped the train that slipped through with the German tanks. They lost a man in the process, Jason, who was really nice to Samira, so Samira was very sad. But Samira is still going to try and do her part to help with the resistance. This is a very interesting book, and it has a lot of sad parts in it. It makes me tear up, so you just have to deal with me. But I'm really enjoying the story, and I hope you are too. This is video 4, and I will be working on video 5, and I'm going to be including some of the details for our virtual meeting in video 5. So make sure you watch it, and I'll also include the virtual meeting information on that Facebook post where I'm posting all of our videos. So make sure you check there for information. Alright guys, I hope you're enjoying it, and I'll see you in video 5. Bye!